the common sense answer is that it varies from community to community, from country to country. I mean, in France, for example, the place I know best, okay, it is massive. Massive. I mean, if you find, let's say we take 1,000 Armenians that are my age, were born in France, and this and that. If you can find among them, what can I say, maybe, let's be optimistic, let's be positive today. You know, let's say 5 who speak Armenian. When I say speak, not just a few words, barev, churdu, no? Who are able to sustain minimal conversation in Armenian. You know, a few sentences in a row in Armenian. If you can find 5 out of 1,000, you know, let's say that are in my cohort, my age, grew up there and so on, you are pretty lucky. Italy, very small community, it's about the same thing. I have cousins in Greece. They have at least one school, it's a little bit better, and there is some modicum of immigration there from the Middle East. For example, I was in Thessaloniki for a conference 2 years ago, so I met some youth who were able to speak, you know, Armenian really easily, but they were not local Greek kids. So it's very difficult to say. It varies from place to place, but the overall picture throughout the 20th century is that Armenian communities tend to not dissolve and disappear, I don't want to exaggerate, tend to weaken culturally, institutionally, in terms of language use, in terms of endogamic marriages and so on, in the West. That is beyond that, you know. The specific data, we don't have enough anthropologists or people who are interested in writing doctorates. They prefer law school, engineering, you know, they are smart. So, you know, our own history or reality is not really well documented. The number of theses on diasporan communities is minuscule, for example. You know, I know approximately all of them. It's extremely small. Okay? So we haven't documented our own evolution in the diaspora appropriately. Yeah.
Stephan, excuse me if I'll be a little emotional.
No, don't be.
I don't want to be. As I look at the picture of these giants of Armenian history, and as you're presenting your genuine, but yet very gloomy picture from a scientific perspective. It's a reality, it's genuine, as I said. You alluded to a couple of factors at the end of your presentation. I'd like to see more of that discussion, not necessarily today, but in papers or in forums where we can be more transparent towards each other as Armenians of concern of these issues, and in publications where we can bring this forth. Now, a quick question. Going 90 years back, as we see Armenians from 2 world wars, genocide, 2 independences, and so on and so forth, is there any comparative, historical comparative to any other nation, except maybe the Israelis, which you mentioned, that we can learn from and take some good experience towards our future?
I think the main case, I mean, I'm trying to think quickly to answer, of course, the best case, because there are many similarities and differences also, but many really good similarities, is the Jewish and Israeli case, you know, of a nation that has a state and tries to do something about it, in particular, of course, attracting outside population to that state. Russian Jews, you know, Ethiopian Jews, these Jews, North African Jews, some of them leave now. The process is much more complicated. It is not that all of those people stay in Israel, you know. Okay? There is now substantial documentation that a lot of them go through to Israel and then after a while go to Canada, the United States, and so on. So it's not a kind of perfect picture there either. Okay? But of course they have succeeded in increasing the size of the Israeli population in a remarkable manner, to counterbalance the astonishing birth rate of the Palestinians in the West Bank, Gaza, and their own Arab Israeli population. Okay? But what is striking, you see, is that on the one hand you deal with people who You may like it, you may dislike it, that's not the issue. You know, who sit down, analyze their situation, and develop policies, coordinated policies, okay, and carry them out, okay, and then assess them, might revise them. On the other hand, you might have some minister of diaspora going from community to community, eating, drinking, talking some remarkable things about Armenians, Armenian culture will not die, and so on, and there is nothing beside that. Okay? The main thing is this problem of having a real public political culture where you can have a public debate based on data, based on disagreement, without people giving you lessons, standing up and, you know, like smart asses teaching you lessons. Yesterday night I had a call, you know, I could hear the attitude. Okay, you might disagree, you are Khunchar, I am Tashnak, he is something else, Ramgavar, assembly. But you should be able to sit down and collectively find the intersection, you know, okay, where, you know, okay, I differ here, but we agree here, okay? So let's try to work on this common area at least. Well, that doesn't take place. I suspect it will be extremely difficult for the Armenian government to even create a structure that represents the diaspora. Who represents the diaspora? Let me ask you. All the political parties and organizations together in the best communities. You know, Southern California, let's say, I mean, a pretty solid community, newborn community, you know, mostly Middle Eastern people and so on, who still have the language and so on. Do you seriously believe that all those people have an influence on more than 20% of the people living in Southern California?
Wow.
Huh?
Maybe 2%.
Do you think that would be good?
In France, they represent nothing. Even the major parties, I mean, you know, what do they represent? Nothing. Nothing at all. So it varies from community to community. I don't want to generalize that they represent nothing. The other side of the coin, one shouldn't despise them. Nonetheless, these organizations are the backbone of the diaspora. If you didn't have them, it would be catastrophic. It would be like the Russian Armenian diaspora at this moment. This moment, it might change, I don't know, okay? So it is all too easy to say, what do they represent, okay? But these are still, you know, the backbones, okay, of these communities that create schools, mine, churches, and this and that. And without that, you have nothing. You have an atomized bunch of people, you know, running around as Armenians. Okay? Yeah. It is very difficult, you know, to find a representative body for the diaspora that can combine these organizations that have pretensions, you know, to the effect they represent the whole thing, and that includes also the remainder, let's say 80% maybe here, or 70%, I don't know, you know, okay? In France, I mean, 90%, 95% easily, without any doubt, okay? This takes seriousness, you know. When you organize, you know, I mentioned the Minister of Diaspora and so on, but it doesn't end there. I mean, there were events, what is it now, almost a decade ago, a kind of 1.5-day fiestas of Congress of Diasporans in Armenia, with bunches of people. I got invitation, so I am not resentful that I wasn't invited. You see, I didn't go there, okay? In 1.5 days, they are going to discuss the diaspora with people speaking for 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and so on, and then a nice banquet, you know, and go back home, you know, inspired by the moment. Okay? But what's the result of all of that? I mean, what's going on? This is nonsense. Okay? You don't develop an institutional structure with this type of fiestas, hooplas of Armenian pseudo-unity, okay, in 1 day or 2 days. So what I am saying is that if there is no serious collective thinking, sense of purpose, of course, I don't see, you know, a concentration of Armenians in Armenia anytime soon, no? Yeah.
Does you have a
Here,
question
here.
for me? Yeah. I have several questions, really. One of them is the reduction in the birth rate is not necessarily an Armenian phenomenon. It's throughout the world, Europe particularly, Italy, Spain, everybody's going downhill. The second point I want to make is that this spreading of the diaspora leaving the homeland is also not necessarily an Armenian phenomenon either.